Three most powerful prayers in the Bible: Psalm 91, Psalm 23, Psalm 35. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, today we are not just discussing words on a page. We are unlocking divine strategies for living a victorious life. Prayer is not a religious routine. It is a legal transaction between humanity and heaven. It is your access point to authority, protection, and provision. There are three prayers in Scripture that carry extraordinary power, not because of repetition, but because of revelation. When understood, believed, and spoken with conviction, they activate realities in your life that no circumstance can override. First, Psalm 91, the prayer of protection. This is not poetry. It is a declaration of jurisdiction. When the Scripture says, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty," it is revealing a spiritual law, not merely offering comfort. There is a place in God that is not accessed casually. It is entered intentionally. The word dwells is critical because it implies consistency, not visitation. Many people visit God in moments of crisis, but few choose to live in His presence as a lifestyle. And it is in that place of continual fellowship that divine protection becomes a reality. You cannot claim the benefits of a place you refuse to occupy. The promise is not to everyone, it is to the one who dwells. Protection, therefore, is not accidental, it is positional. Your safety is connected to your spiritual alignment. When you align your thoughts, your choices, and your priorities with the presence of God, you step into a dimension where fear no longer has authority over you. Fear may knock at your door, but it cannot dominate your mind. Why? Because you are operating from a higher jurisdiction. This psalm is not asking God to protect you as though He is unaware of danger. It is declaring that you have already been placed in a system where protection is built into the environment. Just like a citizen operates under the laws of a nation, when you dwell in God, you operate under divine covering that overrides natural threats. This is why the psalm boldly addresses dangers such as pestilence, destruction, and terror without hesitation. It is not denying their existence, it is denying their right to prevail. There is a difference between presence and permission. Challenges may exist around you, but they do not have permission to consume you when you are anchored in the secret place. You begin to understand that your life is not governed by external chaos, but by internal connection. The secret place is not a physical location. It is a state of consciousness where your trust, dependence, and awareness of God remain constant. It is where you think from God's perspective rather than reacting to circumstances. You are not designed to live in anxiety. Anxiety is a signal that something is out of alignment. You were created to function with confidence, clarity, and assurance because of who covers you. When you understand divine covering, you stop living defensively and start living purposefully. Fear drains your energy, but trust releases your potential. The enemy thrives on your ignorance of position, because if you don't know where you stand, you will live as though you are exposed. But when you recognize that you are under the shadow of the Almighty, you realize that you are not exposed. You are covered. The shadow represents proximity. You cannot be under a shadow unless you are close to the source. That means protection is not about distance from problems. It is about closeness to God. The closer you are, the greater your awareness of His authority over your life. This is why declaration matters. When you speak this psalm, you are not trying to convince God to act. You are reminding yourself of where you stand. Your words align your mind with truth. You are reinforcing your position in the covenant. And understand this clearly. When you declare this prayer, you are not begging for safety. You are enforcing a covenant. A covenant is a binding agreement established by God, and it carries responsibilities and benefits. Your responsibility is to dwell. His responsibility is to cover. When both are in place, the system works flawlessly. No weapon formed against you shall prosper does not mean weapons won't form. It means they will fail in their assignment. Why? Because they are operating outside the jurisdiction of your covering. When divine authority governs your life, outcomes are no longer determined by opposition but by alignment. You stop measuring your security by what you see and start measuring it by who you are connected to. That is the power of this prayer. It shifts you from a mindset of vulnerability to a mindset of authority. You are no longer a victim hoping to survive. You are a citizen of a higher kingdom, established, protected, and sustained by the presence of the Most High. Second, Psalm 23, the prayer of provision. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. This is not a hopeful statement, it is a declaration of settled reality. It is the language of total sufficiency spoken from a place of understanding, not emotion. The psalmist does not say, I hope I will not lack, or I am trying not to want. He declares with certainty, I shall not want. That level of confidence comes from revelation. When you truly understand the role of a shepherd, you realize that provisions is not something you chase. It is something that is managed on your behalf. The sheep does not wake up worrying about where the next meal will come from. It trusts the shepherd's system. The anxiety we often carry is evidence that we have not fully embraced the relationship. To call the Lord your shepherd is to accept a position of dependence, but not weakness. It is a strategic alignment. A shepherd assumes full responsibility for the welfare of the sheep. That means guidance, protection, nourishment, and restoration are no longer your burden to carry alone. Many people believe in God, but they still live as though everything depends entirely on their own effort. This psalm corrects that mindset. It teaches that while you are responsible for obedience, God is responsible for provision. When you reverse those roles, you create unnecessary pressure in your life. A shepherd leads, and that means direction is built into the relationship. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. Notice that provision is connected to guidance. You cannot separate where God is leading you from what He is providing for you. Often, the reason people feel lack is not because provision is unavailable, but because they are out of alignment with divine direction. The pasture is already prepared, but you must be willing to follow. When you walk with the shepherd, you step into environments that have already been designed to sustain you. This is why the psalm says, He restores my soul. Provision is not only about material needs, it includes your mental, emotional, and spiritual state. A depleted mind cannot enjoy abundance even when it is present. Restoration is part of the shepherd's responsibility. He does not just give you resources, He renews your capacity to receive and manage them. When your soul is restored, your perspective changes. You begin to see opportunities where you once saw obstacles. You begin to walk in confidence where you once hesitated in fear. Even more powerful is the acknowledgement of valleys. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. The presence of the shepherd does not eliminate valleys, but it transforms your experience within them. The psalmist says, I walk through, not I am stuck in. That means the valley is temporary, not permanent. And then he identifies it as the shadow of death. A shadow cannot harm substance. It may look intimidating, but it has no power to destroy. When you understand that, fear loses its grip on you. When God is leading you, even your darkest seasons are under supervision. Nothing you encounter catches Him by surprise. Every challenge has already been accounted for in His plan. That means you are never navigating life blindly. You are being led intentionally. The rod and the staff mentioned in the psalm represent correction and guidance. Even discipline becomes an expression of care because it keeps you aligned with the path that leads to provision. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. This is the ultimate picture of confidence. Provision is not dependent on the absence of opposition. God does not wait for your enemies to disappear before He blesses you. He demonstrates His faithfulness in the midst of them. That means your environment does not control your supply. Your source is higher than your surroundings. When you understand this, you stop allowing circumstances to dictate your sense of security. This prayer shifts your mindset from scarcity to abundance, from fear to trust. It teaches you that lack is not your identity and anxiety is not your assignment. You are not struggling to survive. You are positioned to be sustained. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Notice that you are not chasing goodness and mercy. They are following you. That is the result of being aligned with the shepherd. When you live with this awareness, everything changes. You stop striving and start trusting. You stop worrying and start walking confidently in the direction you are led. Because when the Lord is truly your shepherd, provision is no longer a question, it is a certainty. Third, Psalm 35. The prayer of justice and victory. Plead my cause, O Lord, with those who strive with me. Fight against those who fight against me. These words are not driven by bitterness. They are anchored in confidence in divine justice. This is not a prayer rooted in revenge or personal retaliation. It is a strategic transfer of responsibility. It acknowledges that while opposition is inevitable, the burden of vindication does not rest on human strength alone. Life will present moments where you are misunderstood, falsely accused, resisted, or even intentionally opposed. In those moments, the natural instinct is to defend yourself, to argue your case, to prove your innocence. But this prayer introduces a higher way of responding. It calls you to step out of the role of judge and into the position of trust. When the psalmist says, plead my cause, he is using legal language. This is courtroom terminology. It is an appeal to a higher authority, an invitation for God to step in as both advocate and judge. It recognizes that there is a dimension of justice that operates beyond human systems, beyond opinions, beyond bias. When you pray this, you are essentially saying, I release my need to control the outcome, and I entrust my situation to the one who sees all things clearly. That requires maturity. It is easy to say you trust God when things are peaceful, but it is tested when you are under pressure, when your reputation is challenged, when your intentions are questioned. This prayer shifts your focus from retaliation to righteousness. It reminds you that your responsibility is not to win every argument, but to remain aligned with truth. There's a difference between being right and being righteous. Being right focuses on proving a point. Being righteous focuses on maintaining integrity. When you choose righteousness, you are positioning yourself for divine defense. You are saying, I will not compromise who I am just to defeat who opposes me. That is where true strength is revealed. Fight against those who fight against me. This is not an expression of weakness. It is an acknowledgement of divine partnership. You are not abandoning the situation. You are inviting a greater force into it. There are battles that human effort cannot resolve, conflicts that reasoning cannot fix, and attacks that strategy alone cannot overcome. When you insist on fighting every battle in your own strength, you limit the outcome to your capacity. But when God steps in, the outcome is no longer limited by human ability. It is elevated to divine intervention. Handing the conflict over to a higher court does not mean passivity. It means proper positioning. You still walk in wisdom, you still speak truth, but you are no longer driven by the need to defend yourself at all costs. You operate from a place of peace, knowing that the ultimate verdict does not come from people but from God. This frees you from emotional exhaustion. Many people are drained not because of the opposition they face, but because of the constant effort to respond to it. This prayer releases that burden. Victory in this context is redefined. It is not always about public recognition or visible triumph. Sometimes victory is the preservation of your character in the midst of conflict. Sometimes it is the exposure of truth over time. Sometimes it is the quiet but undeniable shift where what was meant to harm you loses its power. When God fights for you, outcomes exceed what you could have engineered on your own. He has access to dimensions, timing, and strategies that you cannot see. There is also a deeper level of trust involved here. To truly pray this prayer, you must believe that God is just, that He does not overlook wrong, and that He does not misjudge your situation. This removes the urgency to fix everything immediately. It allows you to rest in the process, knowing that justice may not always be instant, but it is always certain. Timing becomes less of a concern when you are confident in the one who controls it. This prayer also protects your heart. When you carry offense, resentment, and the desire for revenge, it begins to shape your thinking and influence your behavior. But when you release the battle to God, you guard your inner life. You refuse to let external conflict corrupt internal peace. That is a powerful position to live from. Ultimately, this is a prayer of surrender, but not defeat. It is surrender to a higher authority, to a greater wisdom, and to a more effective way of achieving justice. It declares that you are not alone in your battles, and you are not responsible for securing your own vindication. When you stand in righteousness and allow God to fight for you, you step into a level of victory that human effort alone could never produce. It is a victory marked not just by outcomes, but by peace, integrity, and unshakable confidence in divine justice. These three prayers, protection, provision, and justice, cover the essential dimensions of life. They are not rituals, they are revelations. They remind you that you are not alone, not unprotected, not unsupported. But here is the key. Power is not in memorization. It is in manifestation. You must believe what you speak. You must align your life with the principles behind the prayer. When you dwell in the secret place, walk with the shepherd, and trust the divine judge, you step into a life that is not controlled by fear, lack, or opposition. So declare these prayers not as tradition but as truth, not as repetition but as authority. Because when heaven hears a believer who understands their position, something shifts, not just around them but within them. And a transformed mind is the beginning of transformed life.